Hi everyone, this is OCD Live. I'm Ali Grayman. We're going to be answering some questions about OCD. If you haven't subscribed to this channel, please subscribe. If you have a question that you would like me to answer on the next show, please leave it below any of the videos and let's get started. So the first question is, how can you stop compulsions? So the first thing here is you can't stop everything completely all at once, okay? That should be your goal, but realistically speaking, I mean, we're all human, right? So for you to go from doing compulsions every day to many times a day, right? To not doing any at all is extremely difficult, if not impossible. If it was so easy, nobody would have OCD, right? So it's going to take time, and you have to be realistic about it, because if you start and then you see that it's really difficult, and you will have this desire just to give up. So you have to be realistic and say, okay, you know what? The more I refuse, the more times I say no to it, or at least delay the compulsion. So, okay, I feel like I cannot say no all the way, but maybe I can say no for the next hour. And then after that, maybe I'll come back and examine it or do when I'm saying delaying, I'm meaning mostly puro type of stuff. But you can do it with physical compulsions as well. But with physical compulsions, it's kind of in the moment type of thing usually. So the delaying doesn't always work. But with mental compulsions, analyzing and going back and trying to figure things out, the delaying does work. So you can use that technique if possible, or putting yourself in a situation where you cannot possibly think about whatever you're worried about, right? Like, so being around a lot of people, going out somewhere, so you're in a position where you can't really have time to think, because what happens during that time is between the time that you started to say no to figuring something out, and when you actually decide, okay, now I can do it, right, with the delay, your mind has already lost a lot of the anxiety that has to do with it. So if you started out at level 10 and you refused for a few hours, you're going to be at level 7 or 8 at that point. And when you're there, it's a lot easier to deny doing it for another few hours, right? And so on and so forth, until you get to a point where it's like 2 or 3 and you can just let it go. Because the goal here is not to solve each situation. You can solve each situation and go on like this endlessly, but it's not going to go away, because you're feeding your mind and telling it basically every time that this situation or this type of situation is important. So if you have, say, harm OCD, and you think, this situation, I've done something bad, or I'm going to do something bad. Okay, not this situation, maybe that situation, or maybe it's the same situation, but the details are different, right? So it's all about your reaction. The more you react to something as important, the more your mind is going to send it to you. Your mind has no idea what the situation is actually about. It's looking at it as a set of, like, kind of like how computers, the ones and zeros. That's how that part of the mind understands these situations. It doesn't understand it on a conscious level. It's just sending it to you basically on repeat, because you've taught it over a long period of time that the situation is important. So now we have to undo it, and it's just a repetitive, every day, every moment of every day process. But it's going to start to get easier and easier as you progress. But you have to just push through as much as you can. So going back to the question, the stopping of the compulsions, it's a process. Try to unplug every day as much as possible for you. Don't try to compete with anybody else. Some people go faster, some people go slower. You're all going from point A to point B, from where you are right now to no OCD. And in that way, everybody who's going on this road will recover. Some people will recover faster, some people will take longer. But as long as you're traveling down this road, you will recover. And if you had a bad day, if you started to analyze, if you started to do compulsions, so what? Step over it, move on. Because if you had a bad day, that's not so bad. But if you can't step over it, and then you have another bad day, and another, and another, and another, then it gets progressively worse. So at some point in the string of bad situations, right, where you're actively reacting to the OCD thought. You have to say, no, I'm getting back on the road to recovery. And yes, you took a few steps back, but now you're going forward. So the recovery is more steps forward than steps back. That's all it is. The more steps forward you make, the faster you'll recover. If you're going one step forward, one step back, well, that's not very good, But it's a lot of the time that happens in the beginning when you're first starting recovery and you're not sure and the obsessions are getting to and your OCD is through the roof. A lot of the times that's where people start out, or not even making it to 50%. But it does get better because if your OCD is 10 out of 10, it's very hard to do any kind of recovery work. But when it gets to like 8 out of 10, 7 out of 10, it becomes a lot easier. Comparatively speaking, it's still difficult, but comparatively speaking, it's a lot easier. So you just have to know that it does get easier. In the beginning, see, the thing, obviously the whole idea of experiencing OCD, as you guys know, I've experienced it firsthand, and mine was really, really severe in terms of, how people classify generally OCD. If you guys don't know the backstory, is basically I was on the highest dose possible of medication, and it wasn't really doing much for me. But I still had quite a bit of anxiety, and basically I got to a point where there was nothing I could do. There was nothing to hide behind. There was no medication that was going to help me. There was no special diet. There was no vitamins. There's no meditation. And all those things, they do have their place, but they weren't getting rid of OCD, So I would feel a little bit better doing all these things, but I would still have OCD, So, and from that point, for me personally, that's when I started to really search for recovery. I'm like, there's got to be something. And this is the something, is retraining your mind, And I can tell you now, I've been OCD free for years and years, And so have, like I say, like about 80% of my clients, And the only reason the other 20 don't recover, it doesn't mean that they'll never recover. They're just not ready right at this moment when they're, putting the effort in, and a lot of the times it has to do with different things. It could be that they're too busy and, everything else that they're doing, or they're just emotionally not ready to deal with it, So but as long as you're on the road, no matter how little, I'm sorry to keep kind of going on about this, but it's really important for you to understand this, because a lot of the times part of OCD is a self-esteem issue. You start to feel bad about the situation that you're in because, well, truthfully, it is a really bad situation, right? Having OCD is a really bad situation. But when you start to, get down on yourself and say, well, I'm not worth it, well, all of this kind of stuff, it will make your OCD worse. Because you know how we're saying that we need to show your brain that there is no danger? Well, when you're sending negative signals to your brain all the time, saying, this is not good, I will never recover, blah, 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 all this kind of stuff, especially if other people are in your ear saying this, and this happens a lot as well, that I hear all the time that, friends, family, doctors, whoever around the person will say, well, no, you won't recover and all of this. And then they recover and they're like, oh, you recovered. Because what can they say? What can they say, right? So never believe those people. Don't even take them seriously. They don't know what they're talking about. If somebody tells you you can't do anything, how would they know that you can't do anything? What, they have magical powers? It's amazing how people can put other people down. So don't buy into it. You go down that road. I don't care if you're crawling, you're walking, some days you're running, but you're going, you're making steps forward. And that's what it takes to recover. Even if it's a millimeter by millimeter steps, it's still forward and you will still recover. And it does get easier. That first part of the road is the hardest. So that's usually where people are the slowest. And then once they get to, closer to like lower levels, right? Like 5 out of 10, then they're like running, But in the beginning, most people are crawling, I was crawling. So it's if you're experiencing that, it's normal. Okay, I have to go on with other questions. I hope that kind of this helps, because it's, I'm speaking from the heart, because honestly, that's what I see every single day when I'm helping people with OCD. It's always pretty much more or less the same story, the same situation, and it was the same situation for me as well. So, and it all comes down again to your reaction. No matter how much it scares you, no matter how much fear you feel, no matter how real it feels, no matter that you're feeling guilt, shame, feeling bad, feeling like you're not worth it, put all of that aside. Let it have room in your brain, because it's not going anywhere right now anyways. But let it have room in your brain, and you live parallel to it. And you do things as if it's not there. Oh, you're telling me I'm a bad person? Okay, well, I'm going to go out and have fun anyways. I'm not going to pay attention to all that. I'm going to do what I want to do. I'm going to live my life, And the more you show that power to your brain, the more you resist it, but not resist it like running away scared from it. No, you let it have that room in the brain, whatever. Don't be scared of it. It's just a error in the mind. It doesn't mean anything. And even those feelings that are coming to you, feeling guilty, feeling bad, feeling like you're a bad person, it's the same thing. Don't analyze it. Don't analyze if you're a good person or a bad person. Bad people don't think about this stuff, first of all, okay? So if you're a bad person, you wouldn't be worried about this. You wouldn't have OCD on this topic. Just so, we're clear on this. But you have to move on and allow it to have that room in your brain, And the more you do this, the more you say to your mind, you know what, I don't care if it ever leaves. I'm just going to live my life. This is so silly anyways. I'm not going to pay any attention to it. The more you do this, the more your mind will start letting go of it, because the mind doesn't hold on to information that is irrelevant to you. And the reason why it thinks it's relevant is because you keep reinforcing it. You keep bringing it up. You keep rethinking it. So refuse giving it any more energy. If you refuse energy, there's nothing it can do. It can't get you if you don't let it. So the next question is, what's the best way to combat religious harm OCD? Meaning, if I don't act on these thoughts, I get the guilt that I'm sinning. Okay, so first of all, you have to understand that religious OCD has really nothing to do with religion. It's your mind is saying, well, if you don't do this, you're a bad person. If you're a religious person, it can come out as if, something to do with religion. If not, then it'll come out in some other way. So that's all that it is. So don't confuse the two. Religion is over here, OCD is over here. If OCD is telling you have to do this or that, or you said something wrong, or you prayed the wrong way, those are really common religious OCD themes and situations. Don't repray. Don't try to figure it out. Don't try to analyze. Don't apologize for it. Like, don't try to say, well, no, that wasn't really wrong or whatever, don't try to figure it out. Just say, this is OCD. I'm not even going to try to solve it, trying to analyze it. I'm not dealing with this. I've prayed, I'm done, that's it. Or I've done whatever action you're doing. I've done it this way, I'm not redoing it, I'm not thinking about it, I'm not analyzing. And if your OCD is telling you, well, that means you're sinning, well, OCD can tell you whatever it wants. You don't have to believe it. You don't have to pay attention to it. You don't have to listen to it. It says you're sinning, fine. Because it can say whatever it wants. It's an automatic reaction of the brain. Brain is sending it to you on autopilot. There's no actual validity behind it. Somebody said we need new video, lol. Yes, sorry, I have been behind on videos. I realize that. I'm trying my best to put out as many videos as I possibly can, but as you guys can see, it's once a week is pretty much all I can do. I'm going to try to do more, because I do want to address, there's a lot of different articles coming out on anxiety, OCD, obsessive behaviors generally, and also the effects of meditation, just different approaches to controlling the mind, and I really do want to discuss them, because they're all bringing something to the table, and I'm working on this problem with the videos and putting out more information. So just bear with me. So the next question is, I started recovering about a week ago and I have cut out most of my physical compulsions, but the mental compulsions are really difficult. Not because I reassure myself, but because I get extreme anxiety over the fact that I'm not taking it on. How do I deal with the anxiety? Also, the body dysmorphic disorder and OCD, are they related in any way? Sometimes I have thoughts that people may see me physically differently than how I actually look. Well, first of all, when you are having the beginning stages of recovery, right? When you're dealing with that, and you're trying to cut out mental compulsions, it's going to be difficult. And the anxiety is going to be there because your brain is used to having anxiety. So it's not going to just switch because you made the decision to start recovery. It's going to take time because your brain wants proof, but not in a way of reassurance, but in a way of safety over time. That your brain sees, okay, you're not reacting, but what's happening? Is there anything bad happening to you? No. Okay, and it drops the anxiety a little bit. Then it continues, and as time goes on, it drops the situation, assuming that you're not bringing it up and going back in your progress. So, there's nothing really you can do in terms of anxiety. You just really have to live parallel to it. No reaction. Let it stay in your mind. Let it have a place in your mind, but don't take it seriously. And the feelings that go along with it, the feelings of guilt and shame and all of that, don't take it seriously. In terms of the body dysmorphic disorder, I'm not an expert on it, but it's still an obsessive thought. So in the fact that it's an obsessive worry, I think there is a correlation with that and OCD. But again, like, I'm not an expert on it, but I believe that you can use the same technique that you're using here in that case as well. So, because again, we're training the mind what we want to be thinking, the thoughts that we want to come in versus the thoughts that we don't want to come in, So in that way, I think it definitely does help. So next question is, please say something for OCD, intrusive images and visuals. It's very, very common, especially with false memory OCD, but also with other types of OCD. Just don't react to it. Again, it all comes down to your reaction. It's giving you an image, don't react to it. It's giving you what if something happened in the past, don't react to it. It's going to give you a what if something will happen in the future, don't react to it. It's telling you you're a bad person, don't react to it. No matter what it does, don't react to it. It gives you a lot of fear, don't buy into it. You have to give it zero energy because your mind is actually, in a way, your mind is actually trying to make this go away. Because for this to stay, it needs to be constantly powered up by your fear. So the mind, the second you drop the fear, the mind actually starts to drop it, but then you power it up again with fear. So you gotta stop powering it up. Somebody's asking, is OCD curable? Well, yeah, it's curable. And guess who can cure it? You. All you have to do is, every moment of every day, put in the work. And the more you put in the work, the faster you'll recover. What you want to do, you have to have over 50% average. 50% is not good, even. Like, you have to have, I would say, in the 70s. So 70%, you do the correct action, you react without fear, you see it for what it is. The fear, and this is another thing, is when you refuse to react with fear, right? So the thought comes in. Let me give you an example because it's just better. It works better with examples. Say you are, I don't know, driving OCD, right? And you think, oh my God, I just ran over somebody. I felt a jolt, a bump, right? Maybe I just ran over somebody. That thought is coming into you on autopilot. That's not you, okay? Now, what is your response to that thought? Oh my God, maybe I did. Let me go around my car and check and, go back and circle around a few times and then look at the local news to see if anything is happening. Then I'll call everybody I know and, right? If that's the reaction, you're letting that fear grow. But if you say, I'm not paying attention to it, and move on, then it goes away, you know. And by the way, if you're experiencing any of those symptoms with the driving OCD that I just mentioned, those are all extremely common. So, but you have to stop doing all of that, you know. You can't go back, you can't check. Because if we're looking at a person who doesn't have OCD, a person who doesn't have OCD is driving, hit something, you know, and then like felt a jolt, right? What would they think? They might look back once, maybe, or they'll just assume that it was nothing and will continue going, right? Because if it was a person or something big, then you would definitely know, right? So it's, how would a person who doesn't have OCD handle it? Okay, and you can use as an example anybody who you know who doesn't have OCD, right? How would they handle it? Okay, they would handle it in this way. Then I have to handle it in this way in order to show my brain that this is the proper way to handle this type of thought. And you can see that once you start to refuse the reaction to the thought, you will see that the thought starts to switch very fast from one to another, over and over and over again. Because your mind is trying to find something similar that will give you fear that you will react to, or it will go to a different topic. Because most people who have OCD have 2 or 3 different topics. They'll have the main one that scares them the most, and then these kind of like side topics as well that sometimes they also react to. So just kind of keep in mind that, you know, if it's switching, that's good. The worst is when it's not switching, that you have the same thought, exactly the same thought, that like you're focused on the same exact detail of the same exact thought, because sometimes the thought doesn't switch, but the details on which you are focused do. So that's all right as well. But if you have a thought and it's not switching at all, it means you are actively all the time powering it up, and you need to stop yourself from doing that. Whether you delay, go to a busy place where there's a lot of people, like don't isolate yourself. Anything you need to do, but you need to refuse powering it up, you know? However, or you can even say, okay, I'm gonna, if absolutely you can't refuse thinking about it, then you are thinking about it only once a day. And this is kind of going into the delay thing as well, but you are actually gonna go through and have a thought, but have a limit on it. Okay, I'm gonna allow myself to think about it for the maximum of, say, 15 minutes, and that's it, you know, and then try to cut it down. And if you guys are experiencing, most of the time I talk to people, it's, well, I would say in terms of physical compulsions versus mental compulsions, like puro analyzing, I would say I have a lot of more clients who experience puro than physical compulsions. But if you are suffering from physical compulsions, then what you need to do is, again, the same thing, delay or cut it down. So if I'm washing my hands and I'm going to wash my hands for 20 minutes, I'm going to see if I can wash for 18 minutes, then 15 minutes, and start cutting it down, whatever it is that you're doing. And you're going to feel uncomfortable, you're going to feel anxiety, it doesn't matter, just keep plowing forward with it, you know. Don't reply to OCD, don't engage it, don't do anything to give it more power, you know. Live your life as if you're already gotten over OCD, because that is the best way to show your mind that these thoughts are irrelevant. And you know, a lot of times I get asked, well, will I get that closure? Will I get that reassurance in the end that all my thoughts were nothing? Yes, you will. But by the time you get it, you won't care about it, you know? So, you know, like if I look back in my personal situations, and as you guys, like as I explained, right, my OCD was really, really bad. Some people, you know, might think like, oh, it was so mild, you know, that's why it was, you know, no, it was really, really bad. And you know, looking back on it now, like it's all these thoughts just seem so silly, but because I know how much suffering went into it, you know, it's like the suffering around it was not silly. The time that I've wasted in my life was not silly. Do you know what I mean? Like the thoughts, they were really silly. Now I see that, but you know, so you will get that closure later. But you know, because they don't mean anything to me now, you know, the fact that they're silly, like okay, you know, yeah, you know, they were nothing, but it doesn't bring me comfort, you know. It actually brings me discomfort to think back to those situations because I know how much time I've wasted worrying about something so silly. You know? So it's kind of a different perspective once you get out of it. Last question. When something triggers fear, such as headline in a newspaper, is it better to read the article as an ARP opportunity or just say to yourself, so what, I'm not going to focus on it? Or would it be better to just avoid reading the article at all? But wouldn't that be avoidance? This is kind of a complicated question. So first, we have to decide, do you just generally want to read this article without, putting OCD in the equation? Okay, just you. Would you want to read this article? Do you need to read it? Is it something that you're interested in? Is it important to you right now to read it? Right? And if it is, then go ahead and read the article. What you want to do is you want to make sure you're not altering your life in any way for OCD. So if you do want to read it, then read it and use the opportunity as ERP and say to yourself, you know what? The article is important to me, or whatever it is you're doing. Say you're watching a show and OCD triggers you in some way, right? This is important to me. I'm not altering my plans in any way. Or if you're going somewhere is another example, right? I'm doing what I wanted to do. I'm not reacting to the thought, and this is an exposure, and I'm going to prevent the response of fear, right? So that's kind of how you should be handling it. If it's something though that is not that important to you, then you don't have to do it. I don't want you to be reading articles that are scary or just make you they don't make you feel good. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want you to put yourself in a situation like, for example, people with harm OCD. I don't want you to watch the news all the time, right? In terms of like trying to kind of expose yourself, right? Because it's negativity, and you don't want to expose yourself to negativity. Or say a person with religious OCD. I don't want you to expose yourself to something negative to do with religion. So it's not something that you should be doing. Um, it's as you live your life. If you're exposed, you refuse a reaction, but don't avoid exposures. It's a complicated matter. So it's kind of hard um, to come up with an exact solution. It really depends on the situation, and it mostly depends on what you want to do. So whatever you want to do, you do it, and let OCD figure itself out. You just offer no reaction. So I hope this video helps. As always, I have my recovery program that's available on youhaveocd.com. There's ebooks. We're going to be talking about some new research that is coming in, and I'm going to be probably, if I have time, I want to try to feature it somehow on the website as well. So we have a kind of a place where all of these, they're not so much even articles, they're research from different universities on kind of how the mind works and what works to calm the mind and things like that. But they're putting out articles about it, so it's nice to talk about it and have those statistics and all of the information available in one place. But I'll see when and how I can make that happen. So yeah, please check out youhaveocd.com. If you haven't subscribed to this channel, please subscribe. Please ask any questions below any of the videos, and I will reply in the next show. Before the end of the show, I just want to thank you guys, everybody who's been leaving comments. I read all of your comments. I know I haven't answered as many comments as I normally do, and I'm trying to get back on track with that. But I'm reading all the comments and all the nice messages, and also everybody on this channel who is helping other people and answering and supporting. It's really appreciated, by me, by the people that you're helping. If we can create a community, because the doctors don't help much, right? So it's if you can help create a community where it's not reassurance driven but recovery driven, you are doing a great deed. So again, thank you for listening. If you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe. I'll see you in the next show.